Hello everyone, so good to see you. Now, you may have read the title of this video and have already sharpened your pitchforks and have lit your torches, and I promise I'm going to explain. If you're new here, hi, nice to meet you. I don't hate The Legend of Zelda, nor do I want this to be seen as bait. I quite enjoy the series, it's honestly one of my favorites. But I think I'm a little lost as to what I want or am looking forward to with the series. Not long after the full reveal of the Switch 2, we learned about titles that would be receiving Switch 2 editions, like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom being amongst them. Both titles will be receiving performance updates, visual updates with smoother frame rates, higher resolutions, notably faster load times, just overall enhancements that's going to make this the definitive edition. And that's great! I know more than one person who's going to experience either or both of these games for the first time on Switch 2. And if you have NSO plus the expansion pack, you're going to get these at no additional cost. Kind of shady that the Champion's Ballad DLC isn't included for Breath of the Wild, but that's another story altogether. The thing is, for the most part, I think I'm just sort of done with this world. That's not to say I'm just going to flat out never touch these games ever again, but I think I've exhausted pretty much everything that I can get from these titles as of now. Listen, I've been exploring this version of Hyrule for 8 years now. As big and vast and wondrous as this place is, there comes a time where I just kind of want to move on. Between both games, I spent a significant amount of my time on the Switch exploring and re-exploring the same locations over and over again. And you know, this dilemma came to mind more than once before Tears of the Kingdom even came out. Nintendo saw just how big this game was, how much Breath of the Wild resonated with people, and they wanted to capture that lightning in the bottle twice. But how are they going to do it? Well, what other way than to make an entirely new game within the game? Ultra Hand is such a fascinating system. You can build, craft, superglue items together to your heart's content. You can make mostly anything you can imagine, from vehicles to dozens of ways to propel yourself way into the air. Tears of the Kingdom allows you to rewind time, dive upward into a ceiling, and emerge from the top of nearly any surface. The options are game-breaking. And that's kind of the point in some cases. Maybe not so much the intention of the creators where you can just invalidate an entire dungeon with your contraptions. That sort of comes from giving the player that much freedom should they choose to pursue and use it. It's arguably tempting to do so as well because there is just so much world that I've already been to. But that's not to say that there isn't plenty that needs to be explored for the first time. All of the islands in the sky, the Skylands we'll call them, was pretty amazing at first, especially from the first initial shot when you get the title drop. But as time went on, was I the only one who just kind of found it to be a bit underwhelming? Aside from the Great Skyland, there were like just little bits and pieces around the world. The game fooled me into thinking that there were going to be plenty of Skylands like the first area all over the world, but nah, it was pretty minimal. At least it was compared to the depths, which threw all of us for a loop, I think. Basically the dark world of this Hyrule, where all the elevated portions were now valleys and all the low areas were now peaks. And while it was terrifying at first, in time, you kind of just acclimate and know what to expect. Oh no, it's dark. Better shoot one of my 200 nightlights before I trip on some demonic soul-draining rock. You realize that over time, while it has a cool first impression, it's mostly the same for the entire world map. It has some key set pieces for sure, but I look back and think to myself, why did I spend all my time down here? This could have been much smaller and condensed into like a single region or even a single dungeon, and I think it would have made just as much of a big or even stronger lasting impact on players. The time I've spent with this game is not insignificant. I've unlocked all the points down here, done all the Zonai shrines, upgraded far more sets of clothing than I should have ever bothered with. Look at these! Do you know how many materials you need to upgrade these? It was an obsession. I feel like I'm slowly trailing off topic, but I'll make my point with this. I personally feel like Tears of the Kingdom is the better game to play. Mechanically, there's more to do and play with, and traversal is much more open-ended with a larger emphasis on verticality. But Breath of the Wild has a greater impact that has stuck with people for much longer because it just was the first Zelda game to explore such a huge world. It was crafted in a way that invited us to explore it for the first time. Everything in that first shot, you can point to it and say, I want to go to there. And you know what? You could. Well, after you finish the Great Plateau. I too once tried to descend earlier than allowed and exploded Link's shins as I landed. But once you left off with the paraglider, yeah, man, forget the story. You can run into a volcano if you wanted. There were so few barriers and the world was your playground. and it became that playground for 6 years. For several years, we knew Tears of the Kingdom was coming, and it was much of the same as the first game in terms of landmarks and explorable locations. That's also part of the appeal for some. It's very familiar, and diehard fans can go and pinpoint all the differences now. Personally, one of my favorite changes was all the caves they added. Go into any cave and you have no idea who was in it, what treasures were inside, where it led. I still remember there was a cave somewhere that I think I spent an entire afternoon wandering through because it just wouldn't end. I think that's where I found my first Gloomhand and wanted to cry in the corner. It felt like I traversed halfway through Hyrule Underground before I could find an exit, and that was really cool. Funny enough, I feel like those really invoked those senses of mystery and uncertainty from when Miyamoto wandered into those very same caves that inspired The Legend of Zelda in the first place. But by the time I finally finished Tears of the Kingdom, aside from an incredible ending, I wasn't too sure if I felt satisfied with everything else about the game. Much like the memories of Breath of the Wild, the Tears tell a disjointed story that's out of order depending on which one you find first. There was the return of more traditional dungeons, though the one in the Gerudo region felt the most satisfying. And ironically, I think that's because it walled you off from messing around and using Ultra Hand vehicles to cheese completing it. I'm pretty sure that it was that exact dungeon that made me stand back and think, do I really want all this freedom? Or do I miss the structure of old Zelda games? I could play other Zelda games several times over. Ocarina of Time, Link's Awakening, Majora's Mask, Minish Cap. These have a certain structure behind them that I value, and I've gained a larger appreciation for that structure the longer that we remain absent from it. Exploring a huge open world as cool and awe-inspiring as Breath of the Wild is also somewhat intimidating in some regards. Once upon a time, I knew someone who wasn't really super well versed in games, but she wanted to try Breath of the Wild after watching me play several other Zelda games. I said, "This is kind of unforgiving, are you sure?" But they insisted, and you know, she didn't stick with it all the way, but the important thing was trying. Just trying is the whole basis and philosophy of this game. The concept of just trying is invaluable. It teaches things about the game and your own self. The way you handle certain situations in games like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom is like a fascinating personality test, and I believe you can learn a lot about a person by how they tackled various puzzles and open-ended challenges. It should honestly be studied further. I'll sort of miss that formula when we inevitably go back to a formula where there is only one answer for dungeons or solutions, but it's important that these games still happened in the first place. I personally just feel like I've exhausted myself from open-world Zelda titles after 8 years. This cycle also means that we're waiting an extremely long time from one 3D Zelda game to the next. We do get games like the Link's Awakening remake and Echoes of Wisdom in between, and I'm all for smaller Zelda experiences to be sprinkled in like that. The latter took plenty of inspiration from games like Tears of the Kingdom. It's such a quirky little title, where the only issue I really have with it are the menus and the UI structure. And honestly, that's where some of my issues with Tears of the Kingdom root themselves as well. That game started as DLC, and it became a standalone title that sold for an extra $10. And you know, at the end of the day, it sort of is just expanded DLC. $70 DLC, mind you, for a craft and creation mechanic, extra places to explore, and some story bits. Everybody will slice and quantify it differently, but in my opinion, it probably should have stayed as a focused DLC episode, and made Breath of the Wild as evergreen through the Switch's lifecycle as Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was. At least it's inspired a new Hyrule Warriors to explain yet another side of the story, because we can't seem to learn how to tell these stories coherently within their own games. That means, whether I like it or not, I really am just willingly going back to this version of Hyrule again, aren't I? Oh, but this one's in the past! But like, the super past this time. That counts for something. But I don't want to go too deep into the logistics here. I realize I might just be a hard-to-please fan at my age. Honestly, my tune could change when I see the differences in performance when I finally hold the Switch 2 in my hands. Steve and Brandon documented their first impressions already. They're a lot more savvy with specs and the minute differences, and I am admittedly not the first person who will fuss over 30 frames per second over 60 FPS.
That's just magic to me right now.
Oh my god!
I wish I could be that excited, but as of right now, I just don't know if visual and performance enhancements would be enough to draw me back in. Lately, I can't help but feel like that makes me an ungrateful fan, you know? I mean, the team spent more time with Tears of the Kingdom than they did with Breath of the Wild. That's like an impossible game right there. Devs are still trying to figure out how Nintendo managed to squish all of this into one tiny Nintendo Switch cartridge, even today. When it comes to the Switch 2 edition, I'm gonna dabble with it for sure. I'm gonna play it, see what it feels like, maybe do some streams where I seek out some of the new voice bits that Zelda left behind, play around with Zelda Note's GPS system on the app, and then by then I'll be like, all right, we're good. If you haven't played these before, then that's awesome. You have a great game or pair of games to play on your new console with smooth performance. If you've neglected beating Tears of the Kingdom, then I guess you were never punished, were you? Except if you got the ending spoiled where Link fights Ganondorf. Oops, did I spoil it? Oh, my bad. When it comes down to it, yeah, you know, talking it out like this, I'm probably not going to be playing Zelda that much. I want to play Mario Kart World, Deltarune, probably Welcome Tour against my better judgment. Heck, I'm going to be playing more GameCube games than Breath of the Wild. I'm going to literally accumulate more hours playing Wind Waker on GameCube NSO than either Switch 2 versions of the other Zelda games. It's so wild to compare Wind Waker to these modern Zelda games, because while it feels so wide and open, there's that healthy amount of linearity that keeps the experience on a set path. And I don't think linearity should be treated as a negative term, just as open worlds shouldn't automatically mean a game has more value than a smaller title. I also don't think or expect everyone is going to just automatically agree, because this is the internet, where people feel safe to say things under a mask of anonymity. Anonymity? Anonymity. Okay, well, man, I was gonna do a joke where I was gonna say like, that mask under the mask, is that your true face? Like the Majora's Mask kid, and now I ruined it, so I guess that's the outro now. I don't want to do it over. I'm tired. Thanks for listening to me ramble about Zelda again. I do earnestly wonder, how many of you are gonna dive headfirst into the Switch 2 editions of either Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom? Will you be playing it for the first time, or will you just dabble with it a little? Let me know down in the comments, maybe leave a subscribe, and if you like what you've been seeing on the channel lately, we've got a lot more Switch 2 news and coverage happening very soon, almost daily right now. So if you want, you can support us on Patreon, follow us on Bluesky, and watch us on Twitch. That's all from me for now. Take care of yourselves. Till we meet again.